broccoli though. Yeah. It's awesome. But
Will I?
it sounds great. It also sounds like a nightmare at the same time.
you say
It's
wrong?
going to be pouring rain though.
Okay, all right, guys,
The
we're
weather
able to start.
Oh.
Okay. We're live.
Tell her never mind.
Okay, so I can start there.
Yeah, that's wrong. No, we'll still coming. All the lights are coming, everybody.
I'm good to start, Claire?
That's a good question.
Good evening and welcome to the monthly work session of the Board of Education. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:44 on today, May 10th. If everyone could please stand for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So I know we had a couple of minutes to look over the minutes and the agenda. Does anybody have any questions? Or you want to take a couple of minutes to look over it any further?
3 sets of minutes.
I read through it.
Yeah, I read
the
these
agenda.
already from home. These were fine.
Yeah, 12th, 19th, 26th. Busy month. Yeah. We had like 6 weeks in a row. 6.5.
I'm going to request a boost of salary.
Does anybody have anything you want to go over?
No, not, I'm good. Not from the April.
No? We're good?
Yep.
All right, so let's move on to items for discussion, and we'll start with the Wi-Fi on the athletic field.
Okay, so I'm actually going to turn this over to Mrs. Grio because she's done some work on this with Mr. Fisk, and she will update the board to the status of this.
So currently, unfortunately, in the office,
I have them.
but we do have Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi, it's coming off the technology building over to the press box. And it is going to school board is going to be good. Our goal for the future would be to improve, enhance the reasons. What we use we have a couple of video streaming, we want to have a little bit more robust Wi-Fi. And right now, when deployment is not as reliable as having a fiber. So we did plan to buy Wi-Fi, but we did not plan it with a fiber. However, when the field was installed, Mr. Daly knew that eventually we were going to need to, increase our capabilities. And so we did, in fact, install a conduit underneath the field. So that when we decided to upgrade, to be a little better reliability, the conduit was under the field, and fiber line could easily be run. The problem with the way it is right now is that there are vulnerabilities that are in areas that can make the Wi-Fi be under. And wind is one. And we know experience with it. Right now we haven't had any problems. It is powering our security cameras. It is powering our scoreboard. But if we want to improve and application, we will need to improve it. So what we looked at was the option on fiber. And so while we're doing that, we did a quote a month ago. What would it cost to put the fiber line in so that we had increase in and during that review, we realized that the fiber line that comes from the server closet here in high school, the technology building, does not have the same capabilities as the other fund lines. And that wanting one directly from the press box to the high school server would be great for the press box, but we still had limited or potential lack of reliability going to tech too. And so we felt at this point, we should probably look at both. Because when Mr. Daly ran his Conduit underneath, thinking about the future, he did it thinking we were gonna go from the server closet in the tech building to the press box. Not realizing that that would cause some difficulty because the fiber line to the tech building is not of the high same quality. So, our initial quote would have addressed the press box, it was also quite expensive, because when you go over a certain length, it becomes a special order and have a fiber line that's overextended. When we looked at going and improving the line from the high school server closet to the tech building, and then the tech building press box, we didn't need that special. Ultimately, it's not as possible. So right now, we feel that that's the best option, because we want to not forget the Tech 2 building, the technology building should also have these capabilities in the future. And we might as well do it while we do it, we should do it all for us. So right now, we're waiting for a proposal from BOSI's. We have all the vendors on site, we've done many walkthroughs, we've had many discussions. We were comfortable with the solution we've come up with. There would be two sources of funds. One would be security, because it's powering the security cameras, and there are funds, and there were funds to fund for the technology building customers. And then the other source of funds is the technology funds, the funds from the server project to the technology. This is sort of us, the technology. So we have great, we have absolutely a good plan. We're waiting for a final proposal. I'm comfortable that we can support the piece for security cameras, and I'm pretty comfortable that we can also support the piece from the high school closet to the technology. Line in both areas. It's going to be very reliable Wi-Fi. We do not have Wi-Fi, which is, without having everything up for testing it, you don't really know how to do it. And right now, the cameras are working beautiful, the security cameras, and the school board is working beautiful. But we have aspirations to improve our capabilities, and we also know that we're going to have windy days. And that could vary, that could significantly impact. So we also have happen. So we're on it, and we'll have a solution. We see a proposal, and if we do, and probably we'll do the installation.
That sounds good. I just a couple of comments. My own here is that when we were doing this, the bond was always put out for not only athletics, it was put out for physical education and athletics. And physical education, as you know, we're technology driven, especially from our current technology person who's a former phys ed person. So right now we have no capabilities of using that for physical education unless we complete this with what you're just saying. So I'm very happy that the fact is that, it's not about people in the stands using Wi-Fi.
No.
This is far, far greater. This is, I was just shocked that if this fell out, when we originally spoke about the bond, this was all part of it. And if these things were coming out somewhere along the line about fiber line versus, direct contacts, whatever that might have been, we were never kept abreast of that as a board. We didn't know that was going on. So that when you get hit with that at the end, you say, we have no Wi-Fi? Wait a minute. We can't run the current Bluetooth headsets. We can't run iPads out on the fields. That becomes really, a concern. So I'm happy that we've done the legwork behind it. But I'd also like to stay ahead of everything. And I know the bond is a big animal, as it went through, but constant updating of the board through this kind of stuff is really appreciated at all times.
And I must say
Thank you.
that I'm not familiar with the conversations that fiber line, or they would not have been dropped or not have been shared with the Board of Education. We did talk about Wi-Fi, and we do have Wi-Fi. We just don't have a direct line from the technology building to the press box, which would require a fiber line. So I'm familiar with it being cut, because we've always discussed, and I remember Wi-Fi, but never a discussion about fiber.
But and plus the bond was really developed in 2017, 2018. And I think that our reliance on technology over the past 4 years has greatly increased. And so it was not technically a huge, built into the bond to run a new fiber cable to the field. So obviously now using the NHS cameras and then the huddle cameras that needs it, the coaches, are using certain apps, and where it becomes difficult is the video. Video takes up a lot of whatever it is. Bandwidth. It takes up a lot of bandwidth. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word. And so it's not reliable or stable. So that's really why, because the increased use. The scoreboard has its own system built in. So the computer that works the scoreboard, that has a live a feed that it relies on. So it doesn't have to rely on Wi-Fi. The cameras also work on Bluetooth and don't need to rely on Wi-Fi, but we will tie them into it. But they work without it, the security cameras, but not the huddle and the new system. So my understanding is the NHS, it was NHS, right? That was,
NFHS.
yeah, it was in the gymnasium and it was working fine. It was only put out on the field, but never used because COVID happened. So now that we were going to huddle, we never had any, we never tested it because COVID happened. So those cameras were only installed right before COVID happened and weren't used. So I guess at that time, it wasn't brought up to us.
But again, Mr. Daly didn't know that in the future, because everything is increasing in technology. So he did, but eventually he learned. The most important thing is let them do it, it's underneath the
Position.
field.
We're well
It's
positioned.
positioned, so that would have been the biggest, hurdle right now, had that not been put in there. So I'm comfortable that it's there, I'm thrilled that we're expanding technology use in the athletic program, and phys ed, and so this will be there.
That's great.
Does the fiber line need its own conduit? Can it share it with anything, or, I know sometimes there's interference.
He has his own.
Yeah, okay.
It's there for the fiber.
Right, I'll go.
He doesn't have his share, so it's definitely there for future thinking on his part. And again, I was not aware of the fiber line, maybe it wasn't discussed after that in that much detail, but there is Wi-Fi, and it is supporting the cameras and the school. But now this will improve it, and not a issue.
So there's no additional funds being used for this. They're being taken from the security, you said, and tech funds?
And we're going to use some technology funds, and it'll be taken from our security funds, because that's why we wanted it tied to our security.
Right.
Ensure greater, no loss of visibility due to highways.
Sure.
So it will be,
Is that this budget's
I have.
money or next budget?
This
Okay.
year, This year, so I will try and get it all tied up, and hopefully the investments, honestly. When we
Perfect.
start our new school year, and our new sports season, and we have, our new present programs, we should be able to.
That's great.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Debbie. Okay, second item is the formation of district committee to address diversity, equity, and inclusion. So coming up with a strategic plan and syntax.
So we have been discussing this with, I just want to pull up. We've been discussing this with our administrative team, and I know the board has discussed this and has a strong desire to form a committee. I think that what we need to really think about and formulate, and I have some notes, is what you would like, what the board would like the charge of the committee to be. Would you like this to be a board committee? Obviously, any committee would, of this type, we would really want to include a diverse group of parents, community members, students, and staff. But what would be the specific charge of the committee? And we had discussed also it would be best because, this is such an important topic to bring someone in who can help us to facilitate such a committee and can bring the knowledge and the skills to address this in a meaningful way. So I know Mr. Kilgus had recommended someone. We've also been working with a consultant for really 5 years in the district, doing a lot of training, doing programs for our students as well. So Mr. DiTomaso and I will be meeting on Thursday with Mr. Brown, who is the consultant that Mr. Kilgus had recommended. We did have a meeting with Dr. Kaplan, our consultant, who we have been working with as well. So we will, and we do have a few other names. So we would really like to thoroughly look at, who is available, who would be a good fit, and then really get some direction from the board as to what you see the goal of it being. Obviously, our DEI policy is very comprehensive, and there is a lot that the administration has already been doing to address the DEI policy and implementing various programs. But specifically, this committee would be to, what would the charge of this committee do? So would it be, we are already committed to providing equitable opportunities and support for our diverse students, making sure that we have programs that every student has access to, regardless of their race, gender, socioeconomic status, and the like. And I think we are doing a good job at that. We're looking at our data to analyze access to those programs, like data, for instance, in AP classes, data in our AIS program. So we are currently analyzing that, and that's certainly something that can be reported out on in the fall to see if we have disproportionate numbers in any particular group, or are we equitably providing services based on access and need. And then, so what aspects of our policy would this committee address? So creating and maintaining a welcoming and inclusive and equitable school climate, providing curriculum materials that represent and affirm student identities, provide professional development, which is something we're already doing, that supports innovative, inclusive, and culturally responsive teaching and learning. And I think we've been addressing that ongoing through the last number of years. It's an ongoing process. These goals are ongoing. It's not something where you're going to say, okay, we're done, and we've achieved everything in the policy. I think it's something that we would continue to address. Another possibility or part of either the committee or the strategic plan is to recruit, retain, and develop a diverse faculty and staff. That is part of our policy. Collaborating with community partners to provide access and opportunities for students, amplify student voices, and encourage student leadership opportunities in this area. And of course, provide inclusive programs that strengthen the emotional and physical wellness of our students as well as our staff. So those are just some thoughts that I pulled together, and I think we can certainly present something, a format, or I can send something home. We could have a special meeting where the board would like to discuss that with the administration. We can have a subcommittee of the board meet with the administration. So if we could talk about what is the board's vision going forward, and then we can certainly present what a vision for the committee might be, or some various options for the committee as a charge. Because I think it's very important that we have a clear charge. Committees that don't have a charge can often go awry, and we really want to have an objective. And that objective obviously is going to include hearing the different voices in the community, because that's important, but to what end? So obviously that's part of the process, but the goal and the charge of the committee would be I think it's important to formulate something. So that's pretty much where I am now. As far as Syntax goes, I did reach out, I put this in the board update, I did reach out to Syntax, and they were very supportive of our communications subcommittee because that is their charge. I mean, that is their role in their firm, as they are a communications firm. When I reached out and talked to them and discussed what their role would be moving forward in a diversity, equity, and inclusivity committee in the community, they felt that it was that's not their area of expertise, and that their role would be to their role would be to help promote a call for members through the district website and social media accounts, promote the committee, its goals and its progress and success with press releases and articles as necessary, and really report out to the community on what we are doing, because obviously this work is critical, and it's important that the community know what we're doing. So that's the role that they would play, not really to formulate agendas or to collaborate on the committee, because it's not their area of expertise, whereas communication was. That's what they do. So
So I have a couple of things from everything you just said, is that I think it should be a subcommittee, just like the communications was a subcommittee. And the subcommittee should then meet with integral parts of the three buildings. You have your administration in each of the three buildings we have parents in each of the three buildings, and we have students in each of the three buildings. Integral parts. They need to have part in this, okay? Plus, the last part would be that becomes community, because those three parts make up the community of our schools. So the community encompasses all those three parts. With those three parts, then using the strategic plan, because now we're building the strategic plan, and in the strategic plan to make sure we address all of our policies on DEI that we went ahead and approved, and we're constantly looking at them, all right? So that now this subcommittee would use the strategic plan to make sure they're following, and as a school district, we're following, okay, all the DEI that should be included here, all right, to make sure our students, parents, okay, community members are all having what they need to have, okay, as far as feeling of security. Syntax, I also believe, though, is a very integral role here, because their role is communications. So when we hire outside people, we've had, as we just said, somebody working with the district for years now. We're looking at somebody else right now. Their role would be, everybody has to be trained on this committee. You just can't put a bunch of people together from all over the place and say you're a committee. I went through this with the Long Island Nets and Erase Racism, and we formed our committee, our DEI committee, okay, for Section 8, which is all of Nassau County athletics. And what we did is we provided for every member that was on this committee, okay, training from Erase Racism. And what they did is they carefully covered every aspect of DEI language, vocabulary, so that everybody was understanding of all types and creeds, races, religions, everything, okay, of where we are today. Integral part, the committee needs to be trained. That training should take place, okay? We did it via Zoom because it was easier to get to everybody, because it's intensive training. They use videotapes, they use, there's 100 different ways they come at you. But the great part about this is that everyone on that committee is on one level. They all know the language, they all know where they should be going. There's no implicit biases, even though they exist in people, and they will always exist in people. They will understand how they exist in people, and they will be able to work together, okay, to come up with respect and dignity for everybody when they're talking around the table. So the strategic plan, key ingredient. Go back to Syntax for a minute. Okay, trainings, by the way, is the second key ingredient. The committee needs to be trained. The third one is Syntax, because Syntax is a communications vehicle that the district employs, and they know how to get information out properly, timing of information. The last time we had our subcommittee with syntax, they were astute on other districts who tried to roll things out too quickly or not fast enough. They know how to roll things in Long Island schools. So they need to be part of the committee. The agenda building, no, not necessarily, okay, because that's where your professionals would come in. But more so, syntax needs to be able to make the calls of rolling things out as the board hears them and then moving them forward. And that's exactly the way that subcommittee went the last time. So I'm welcoming all of this. I think that we're off to a fantastic start. I think by vesting in the principals, 3 principals in each building to select their subcommittee, this ingredients of students, parents, and faculty members within those buildings, part of it, it all makes it come together. It empowers each and every building. And I'm welcoming to, for a board member or 2 to serve on the subcommittee when they meet and discuss issues that need to be discussed within this district, and then bring them back to the board. That will allow board meetings to be held, okay, where those letters that were being written all the time, they will go to the subcommittee and they will deal with those letters, okay, because they have that kind of time and energy level, and then brings it to the board so the board can really look at policy, because that's the only thing we can look at. That's the only thing we can decide in this district is policy, okay? And we will have that ability. And also from hearing everybody, we'd also know that where we have to go to for the administration to find out why that might be occurring in a particular building. Why hasn't a student been looked at in a particular building or heard properly, if that was the case? All right, now the principal is alert from the subcommittee. So a lot of great things will come out of this subcommittee. And the biggest thing I remembered from our subcommittee we had on communications is it stops the gravy train. And the gravy train, in my book, is always that everybody is saying things, but the reality is it's said in a different way than it's happening. So that's why the subcommittee to me is so important. I thank you, Superintendent Ruiz, for looking at this right now, okay, for starting this off, okay, so that, as you move on and no longer with us, we have now a foundation that you built for the future, okay, to keep us going. Thank you.
I also think it allows for a two-way conversation. So people
every
know
day.
in the community what we're doing here in the district. We got a report from the professional development with Dr. Kaplan, and we saw all the wonderful things and the way in which DEI was being, addressed or implemented in the classrooms and by the teachers in each of the schools. And we heard from the students. We had the quotes from the students and the quotes from the teachers and where we are now and where we're going to go, because we want to keep improving and getting better. And I think if more people know that, then they might understand a little bit more about the wonderful things that are happening here. So
We have been doing the
Thank you,
work,
yeah.
and obviously we have not publicized what we've been doing enough.
You're right.
We
Yeah,
have been
you're
doing
absolutely
it.
right.
Yeah,
100%.
over the years. We
100%.
have a record of a lot of professional development and even, student workshops that have been provided over the last couple of years. So we are proud of the work we've done, but as I said before, it's obviously not enough, something that we need to continue to do ongoing. And I think to engage students as you described, Mr. Volkers, engaging students in having a voice, not just receiving the training, but formulating it, identifying where the needs are, and having greater discussion and communication across all the different levels. I do think it's, I know some districts and communities have engaged people from not just parents and students and faculty and administration and the board, but people in the greater community, because that can also extend, as we did with our Engage Every Family, we did that with our strategic plan, and because this can't be done in isolation in the school district. The school district is a part of the community, and so I think including community members who also have a strong voice, who may not necessarily have students in the school, would be important and helpful.
Agreed.
That's a great point, and that point, I think that another thing that the subcommittee would be able to at least communicate and deliver to local government, okay, within the village itself, and sort of like an action plan that's happening within the school district and extending it over, like Kristen just said, to have that open conversation back and forth, and how can both of us assist. As we all said the last time, it's a careful get there because we have to worry about the school district first. You know, it's a microcosm of the community, but the schools. And when we heard those children get up and say the schools failed us, they didn't say the community failed us. They said East Rockaway schools failed us. So that's our charge. And as a board member, I'm really hyper now sensitive to that charge. And the charge where I want to make sure that this subcommittee services our schools and our students and our parents first. Yes, they are part of the community. They need to be part. And that's probably a second subcommittee, extension to go out to the village.
Absolutely.
So what would you like the next step to be?
I think we should outline exactly the stakeholders that we think should be involved, which we've been talking about this for quite some time. But I think what we need to do is outline the specific stakeholders that we would like to see involved and start putting pencil to paper in terms of who and how many. From there, we can also, or in parallel, we should be putting together our business plan, so to speak, or our purpose, our statement, what we stand for. I mean, it's one thing to appreciate our differences, but it's another thing to focus and encourage what unites all of us. And if we're able to, not demonstrate, but if we're able to put that out to our community, to our stakeholders, so that they can then filter that out to everyone else within their own networks, so that the focus really remains on loving and appreciating our differences, but really, really focusing on what unites us all. What are our common grounds? What are our common interests? Why are we on the board? Why are people sitting in the seats right now? It's our students. It's the betterment of their education. It's the whole idea of lifelong learners that are looking to not just better their community, but learn to love one another and be united. And if we could focus on unity, although we are academically, we're a school and it's all about great grades and the best programs and AP courses, being able to, join hands with the idea of uniting the community, I think is pinnacle in what makes East Rockaway so special and an amazing place to live, and not focusing on what happened 20 years ago, but focus on what's going to happen in the near future and our goals as a district, and maintaining that idea of unity. To me, that, we have our strategic plan, we have our important bullet points of I think unity should be like at the top of that. Uniting the community, making everyone realize that, it's not about any one individual on a team, right? What makes a great team? It's not one person. Michael Jordan wasn't incredible without Scottie Pippen or Dennis Rodman or everyone else on the team. Focusing on a team environment and keeping that parallel moving forward. And I think you'll see a big difference in our community, as well as at the board meetings and people reading letters about how they felt 20 years ago. Forget about what happened yesterday. Let's focus on how we're going to implement a new strategy and hold hands and cross the finish line together. If we can actually do that and put our differences aside, you are going to see day and night compared to what it was and to what it is moving forward. That would be my goal, personally.
Thank you. Well said.
Yeah.
Well said.
I caught the end. That sounds great.
I think
Good.
it would be
Yeah.
helpful if the board could select the representatives to start with, at least for now, so we could hold a planning meeting.
I mean, we can, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Just thinking out loud, we can also round robin it. It doesn't have to be the same one or two or three people every time. Maybe it's a good idea to rotate members so that everyone is involved in this process, and that you have every single stakeholder from the BOE, from, you get an administrator or two, you get a principal, in my opinion, not to give anyone any extra work, but I think a principal from each building should be on the committee if possible. And then just go right down the line. It would be great to have some seniors and maybe some juniors, or, we can outline this. We don't have to sit here and outline it right now, but I think we can really I'll put some ideas together of the specific stakeholders that we think we would love to have involved and put some numbers to it. How many community members do we want or need for that matter? And if we put it out there, I'm sure we get a pretty good response.
So maybe what I'm hearing is we're assigning ourselves some homework here. And, we'll start with an outline, start getting down some notes, start drafting maybe a mission statement that we would like.
We did
and
last
then-
time. I have my other notebook. We took amazing notes and we have like a million ideas, and we gotta start now and maybe advertise a little bit. I'm sure there's a lot of people that would love to get involved in this. We just need to know how many is too many.
I think that's where we need
Yeah.
the vision and the charge for the committee so that we could put out a call for members and, promote the committee. So-
Should we
Just
start?
Not to interject,
Go ahead.
just if I could get into this one thought. If you remember, Lisa, when we started communications, we really allowed the committee really to make those charges and come up with them. If we're getting an outside resource to work with this committee, the subcommittee, I think it's so important that the board gets an opportunity right away to hear from this individual.
Right.
So the individual hears from us and all the notes that Dan has taken and we've all talked about. And then let's hear back from this individual, okay, what they have to offer us. Will it fit the bill that we want it to fit, okay, of making everybody come together, okay, in unity with this? It's so important for that, because then after that, training comes with subcommittee members. And in the meantime, trusting the administration of the buildings to come up with the subcommittee ingredients, people you want to see on that subcommittee that you think are important, PTA people.
That's right.
Which,
That's right.
There are so many things that the administrators will see their vision on that. I don't want the board should not be micromanaging this.
That's
Board, this is a subcommittee that's going to feed into the board. The board has the major objectives, as we all know, okay? And the policy making is enough, all right, that on meetings that we're challenged with it every time. That's why the subcommittee has got to really be effective in growing their own roots and their own mission statement with it, as long as it's conforming to what we've had here and why we see it an important factor. So I think our next step is ASAP, bring in whoever we're thinking of bringing in now, all right, as soon as we can, get a Zoom with them or a live meeting with them. And that meeting shouldn't be more than 45 minutes at tops, just to hear out and ideas, and then let it run with the administrators. Like everything we do as a board, we allow our administrations to run the buildings. We don't run the buildings. We shouldn't be running programs. This is a subcommittee.
I think it sounds like we have a good starting off point. And then we'll work on this more, I guess, within the next meeting, or if we need to hold a special meeting.
Well, is there a charge now that Lisa, do you have the name of the individual that you can reach out to? How does that work?
We have the one consultant that we're meeting with on Thursday.
Oh, beautiful. Is
That
there
sounds
already?
promising.
Mr. Brown on Thursday.
He said he was
I
outstanding,
said
too.
we
I
also
thought he was
have a
great.
current consultant that we're working with. And then I have two other leads. So I think we would like to really meet, Mr. DiTomaso and I will meet with the consultants and then recommend someone to the board, and we can schedule a meeting. I don't know if we have two good people. If you want us to decide, we'd be very happy to pick the consultants and then bring them to meet with the board. I think this is, if you're saying it is a board committee, I would want the consultant to meet with the board to help create the vision. And then, unless you want the principals to create the vision. So I guess I'm still not quite clear on that.
I think the vision is more so important that the administrators, meaning principals, okay, are forefront in this, because they're running their buildings every day. They know the strong points, weak points of their buildings. They know where that comes from. All right, so in consultation with the consultant, the principals, the administration, central administration, all pull us together, and then are presenting back, like we always do, to the board and the updates.
So it wouldn't be a board committee then, it would be a district committee
Every-
that board members would sit on, because
It's a
you do have
subcommittee.
a board subcommittee. So
Yeah.
because there is a difference between a committee that's a board committee, and then a committee that we've run in the district, like the strategic plan, like the Engage Every Family. Board members sat on that, but it wasn't a board committee.
Right.
So that's why I'm not really sure about.
Which one would you recommend for this type of committee do you think would be more beneficial?
I think, well, I think it would be great if it's a board committee, a
Okay.
board subcommittee, because I
Okay.
think the board feels very strongly about it. And I think, if it is a board subcommittee, it shows commitment by the board. I don't want to speak for you.
I mean, I think
so-
we're very
No,
committed.
yeah, no,
I don't think anyone questions how committed we are as a board. I think you had the right idea, Dom. It should run through the principals who control their school, their buildings, and we should certainly be there to help and support. If we're coming up with a committee and telling everyone what they want to do, you've heard some of the feedback that happens at some of these meetings. We're going to start telling everyone what they want. No, I think that's a bad way for us to start it.
That's not what we did when we had the communications committee, but there was a clear charge for the communications subcommittee, and it was a board committee, and there is a qualitative difference and a procedural difference when it's a board committee versus a district level committee. So, that, I think either way is fine. It's just to define what might work better, a committee where the board sits on it, or a board committee where the board creates the vision for it, and then the committee works collaboratively, because the committee did work collaboratively, but we did meet, Dom and Neil and I, and then Pete and Dom and I met to formulate the agendas. So that's a little bit different, because the board drove the committee. A district level committee, the district administrators drive the agenda.
Is the board inclusive enough in a situation like this? And I say that because I've heard things like there's 5 white faces up there or whatever. Maybe we should have a very inclusive committee from the beginning that is not the board telling everyone what to do, but the board in full support,
Yeah.
offering our support. We
Yeah,
talk
right.
about inclusivity.
So a district level,
Right.
what I'm hearing is a district.
Yeah,
I think so.
I think it's a better way to do it. I don't,
Can we have them, whoever's on the committee can help with the charge? So everyone has an equal voice.
I tell you why it's so important, and you guys bring up terrific points, and Lisa, thanks for bringing this to our attention, even to delineate this part, because I've seen way too many times, and we all have seen as teachers in the buildings, policies that never even know exist, because they're not daily part of your job in the classroom. And I would hate to sit down and have this subcommittee, advise the board, and the board put policy, and then there's the disattachment
that's right.
to the buildings. There's a disattachment to kids. So what we need to do is totally attach to that. And that administrative committee that you just said, Lisa, for the buildings, that really fits the bill there to me. That's terrific.
Yeah, I think the vision and the charge can be broad enough that then bringing that to the committee, I think the training is really great.
Training is
Yeah.
key.
That's
Absolutely.
Training is
critical.
key.
And then the committee can set, you could have even just a steering group of people who can meet to set the agenda. At the end of each meeting, if it's a large committee, you could have maybe 5 people with representatives to drive the agenda that can determine the course, how the committee is going to operationalize or implement what the vision or the charge is. So that's, I think that would be helpful. So we will bring it back to the administration. I just, knowing all my years, chairing committees, if we're not clear about what our vision is and what our charge is to accomplish, even in a very broad sense, it doesn't go as well. So
Agreed.
we can work on something that we will share with the board. We can approve what we come up with for the charge, and then we can start inviting. I would think it's a great, as we've done with strategic planning. It's not like we get 800 members to put a call out to, if you want to limit it to parents and students and faculty and administration, that's fine, so that you would get a broad representation rather than having the principals select the members. We can certainly nudge and invite people, which we always do, but I think putting out a general call call to action for people, families, who send something out that we're formulating this is what the charge is going to be, and, we're looking for a group of people we're going to bring various different perspectives to the table. to
Right.
Great.
work.
Yep,
And
that's
then we'll be able
exactly
to get
what
an
we want.
idea of who's interested and who's, yeah, I think that would be great. And then the real work can even start right over the summer. Prior to the school year. Okay, I think we're in a good spot.
Yeah, yeah, this is exciting. I
Nice,
mean,
yeah.
it's been, we've been talking and putting little plans into place along the way, but it'll be great to see pencil hit paper with this.
Okay, so those were our only items on our agenda. For those people that are tuning in, we are sorry for the delay. There was some technical difficulties, but we will be having the budget hearing next. So this concludes our work session. Can I have a motion to conclude the work session? So moved. Everybody else in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And we are now going to move on to the budget hearing. Mrs. Rio, the floor is all yours.
Shall we go to the seats?
Yeah.
Okay, so good evening and welcome to the 22-23 budget hearing. These are the topics we will be discussing. So first, I'd like to start out with our financial accomplishments and our long-term goals. So starting back in 2006,
We're not getting a clear picture of the PowerPoint on the camera, and I think it's important what you're talking about. We're getting our custodian to come down.
All right, Jack.
is that better? No? Okay, don't talk, or the little robot will turn around and look at you. This is, shouldn't be this difficult.
Can you send this to the email? And then I'll ask her to post it so people can follow.
I don't have access to email here. This is not my site.
I don't understand why it's not working. Claire, what if you put the camera further back? We apologize for the technical difficulties.
She put-
Well, we had situations where the camera wasn't
we didn't-
capturing what was on
we
the
didn't
screen.
know it.
Flash drive.
That's what I'm working on.
No, I downloaded it to your,
Oh. It's working off the flash drive, I can tell you that much. But the other one was frozen.
I just downloaded it to the, I just downloaded it to the desktop, so it should stay there. Okay, maybe you can announce that we're going to be posting PowerPoint online, and if,
So is this
you
gonna
can start, and
continue?
then people can follow along.
All right, well, this is not, this doesn't have my notes or anything on it anymore.
Okay.
This is what happened before when I came in, it didn't work.
I had it all set up.
Yeah, but it didn't work, I clicked, that's why I used my drive.
No, I had it all set up. I don't know why it's not working.
I do need the notes, that's how I do the presentation.
I know, I did it. I had it all set up, Jackie. I don't know who touched it, but
Yeah, it works off the drive without a problem. That works, yeah. But it's gotta be off of this.
let's see if it really doesn't, because I just loaded it to the desktop. You just probably had to log out and do it, but that's fine. I'll just post it later. Just say we're having technical difficulties.
I mean, I can, the amount of time it's taken, I could just run down to my office and submit it this way. I don't think she has the document. Oh, love it. I do.
James,
Yeah.
is that working?
It's getting a little.
Claire, what if we gave it to you and you put it on your laptop and projected your laptop onto, would that work without the camera?
So
No, but then you wouldn't have sound.
No.
No, never mind.
if we did this on the stage, I think would be much better. Do you want to see this?
Does that work?
Yeah, no, that's the Wi-Fi. You're gonna have to pull those wires, you can't.
Why don't you stand?
Would you be standing there?
Get out.
He'll get out of the way.
I'm sorry, you're standing in Elm Street.
It always goes to the website. All right.
We
So-
apologize for the technical difficulties. I'm not sure why we're having so much trouble getting the image to project onto the live stream. We apologize. We're going to get started. And then we will post the presentation to the website so you can listen along, and then you'll be able to see the images tomorrow or later tonight.
So, good evening again, and welcome to the 22-23 budget hearing. So I'd like to start with our long-term goals and our financial accomplishments. We began planning long-term goals back in the 2016-17 school year when I began. The Board of Education, Superintendent, and I discussed many things that we felt we needed to accomplish. So one of the goals was to limit our tax levy increase to the best of our ability. And I believe you see my little check mark. For the past 3 out of the past 4 years, we have come in below the tax levy cap, meaning that the cap allows us to tax up to a certain amount based on a formula. And we have chosen to come below that amount by $1.3 million. I think that is a significant achievement by the school district. Capital Reserve Fund, we managed to allocate $6.2 million in the beginning of 2016 to 2019 to help offset the 2019 bond projects. And we wanted to improve our district fiscal rating. We got an upgrade to AA2, which is a very good rating For a district of our size, it's a good rating in general, but even more so for a district of this size. We just recently had a Moody's analysis, which was posted and is on our website, where we continue to maintain this even in these difficult times. And it was very clear, if you read on the first page, that one of the reasons why we continue to carry this is due to our conservative budgeting, which allows us to have surplus at the end of the year and continue to build our reserves. Reserves are needed in case of emergencies, and anybody in this school district knows that we've seen our share of emergencies. Did it change? No. Okay. Additional long-term goals was removing the dependency on the capital reserves to support our annual plant maintenance and annual capital projects. So what this is, we previously would rely on the capital reserves for any maintenance for the plant and any annual small capital projects. That is not a good way to run your school district. These things should be part of your general operating budget so that there is money there on an annual basis to address these needs. You can't constantly rely on reserves for things that are annual maintenance projects. So we have completely come off of the capital reserves, and these areas have been brought back into the operating budget. In addition, we were relying on $1.5 million in the 2016 school year, 16-17 school year, to bridge the gap between the expected expenditures and our anticipated revenues. Again, not a way to be supporting your budget. It's like taking money out of your savings account to meet your car loan. Eventually, your savings account is going to run out. So one of our biggest goals was to get off of a dependency on reserves and bring that money and kind of get our budget aligned with the anticipated revenues. To date, we've reduced it by 1.4 million out of the 1.5 million. Again, we had anticipated having removed our dependency on reserves completely by actually the 2021 school year. But of course, COVID has changed a lot of things and kind of put a lot of our goals and planning pushed it a little back further. We are now only relying on $100,000 from reserves. Another goal was to reduce our dependency for technology replacements. Our hardware technology plan was developed a couple of years ago. Technology has become an extremely important part of our instructional program. And again, we were relying on reserves to replace our hardware. And we have expanded our hardware. We've gone all the way to 3 to 12 for one-to-one initiatives and built that into the budget as we expanded our one-to-one initiative. And right now, we're still relying on $100,000 annually out of the reserve fund. That's why you see a little box, because that is our next, that's the only goal right there that we have not met, and our plan is to meet that by next year. Capital Reserve Fund for future projects. We closed our last Capital Reserve Fund, and we applied it to the 2019 bond to reduce the debt service and the cost to the taxpayers. At this time, we feel it's time to recreate a new one so that for the next 5 to 10, maybe 15 years, we can start to accumulate funds in that reserve. And again, we'll be in a good position to offset capital expenditures in the future without an impact to the taxpayers. So that's still got a little box, but it is one of our propositions for this year. The thing with a reserve fund is that it requires community input to create it, to fund it, and to expend it. So the money is put there, and then we would need the community vote to allow us to use it for specific purposes. So this is our budget process. We begin in the fall. We had 4 public work sessions. All of them are posted on on the website for you to go and revisit. And then we had our budget adoption on April 12th. Our vote is next Tuesday, and this is, of course, the budget hearing. As you all know, back in several years, 2015 was it? I wasn't here. The Board of Education, the superintendent, and community developed a 5-year strategic plan. And we have determined 4 focus areas. When we build our budget, all initiatives and all expenditures take these areas into account. We don't add anything or remove anything unless we look at these 4 goals. Currently, we are in the middle of a strategic plan to develop the next 5 years. So I'm not going to read all of this to you. I put it in the presentation because for those of you who have time, there are presentations up here at the table. For those of you who are at home, this will be posted on the website. I think it's important for you to understand, based on that strategic plan, what have we done to support it? What have we added? What initiatives have we taken into place? Not just what initiatives for this year, but what initiatives have come out of that strategic plan to improve this program, the instructional program for our students. And so you'll see this is our staff.
I'd be happy to explain that. We do use a lot of jargon in education, so I apologize for that. So AIS is Academic Intervention Services. Those are for students who are struggling learners that are not reading on grade level. They're kind of lagging behind. So those are services in math and English language arts. So we provide those academic services for those students. ENL is English New Learners. So those are students who come into our schools and are not native English language speakers, and we give them support in learning the English language.
Oh,
Okay. So this is the staff that we've increased. These are student opportunities that we've done over the last several years. Quite a bit of them, quite a long list. And again, at your leisure, you're more than welcome to review this. These are other programs that we've brought into the district over the last several years. All of this at or under the tax cap. Additional funding to support a lot of new curriculum, a camera system so that home games could be live streamed and the community can watch them for free. So we've done a lot of really great things over the last several years. These are the facility improvements that we've implemented. You see, we've got new buses and vans, new adult education. That shouldn't say that. It should say driver education. So I'm reading it right, but that's not what it should say. So I will correct that. That's a new driver education vehicle. So it has all the safety features of the most recent cars. A vehicle was old. It was in need of a lot of repairs, and it didn't have a lot of the safety features of the newer vehicles. So we felt it was time to purchase a new one so the students were learning on a vehicle in which they will be driving in the future. These are additional facilities improvements. Again, these are right in the general fund budget. We are no longer relying on reserves, and these are many of the projects that we've done over the past 5 years. So our security enhancements. Security for the Board of Education and the Superintendent and Administration has been a top priority. And over the last several years, we've made significant investments, creating a safe environment for our students and our staff. So this is a list of what has been implemented in the past 5 years. So let's get to what we're really here for, the 22-23 budget. So Currently, we're running on a $41.7 million budget for the 21-22 school year, and we're proposing a $42.6 million budget for the 22-23 school year. That's an increase of $869,000, or 2.08% budget to budget, which is significant. That's a pretty low number when you take into account contractual increases. However, it's important to note, and I write this here because it's unusual. We had a Living with the Bay project here. Discussions about getting the funding and the improvements here to the district facilities began back in 2015, before I even began here, and they continued until the projects were completed here in 2022. So this was a 7-year process. And what the district gained from this was the bulkhead around our high school fields, which we desperately needed. A high school parking lot in the back of the building was repaved. We got a generator for the high school, and they renovated our high school basketball court. All of this done by the Living with the Bay with no cost to the district. However, for the 7 years of work, time, and effort in the planning and implementation and design of this project, they agreed to reimburse us $230,000. So we are receiving that. We received part of it already, and we expect to receive the remaining amount by the end of this school year. So that was money or revenue that was unaccounted for. So we decided, well, what are we going to do with that? We should really use that money for projects that the district needs that we don't have a source of funding for. And we decided, since all of the renovations and benefits that we got from Living with the Bay were here in the high school, that we should use that to fund some upgrades that are needed in the elementary buildings. So when that revenue comes in, we have earmarked that revenue to be held and used to offset the cost next year. And we're using $230,000 to replace, as a portion of replacing our 5 playgrounds at the elementary buildings. And I'll discuss that a little further. So ultimately, if you really think about it, our budget to budget increase is only $639,000, or a 1.53% budget to budget increase. That includes keeping all of our instructional programs, keeping all of our staffing, and adding enhancements. These are the district initiatives that we are adding for the current 22-23 budget. We're going to hire a literacy coach, which we already have hired, who will begin in the 22-23 school year to assist at the elementary buildings. We are purchasing new health curriculum for both our middle and high school students, replacing the computers in the high school library. We have continued to support and expand our enrollment in CTE programs. I believe, I don't know, what is it, 6 or 7 years ago, we had room for 5 students in the budget, and we are now in the 22-23 supporting 23 students attending the CTE programs. And this year in 22-23, we're going to roll out our Nassau Community College concurrent enrollment program. So a lot of really good opportunities for our students. Again, in a budget to budget increase of 1.53%. Additional opportunities, we have the Rock Orchestra, which is now going to be official club. It has been running for the last couple of years on a volunteer basis. This will ensure that this Rock Orchestra will continue long term. The other areas that we're increasing is we're putting a junior high school winter track coach, an assistant coach for our varsity winter track. And as you know, with our new track, we are getting a larger interest. So our programs are growing. And then we're going to increase our intramural programs. And that's going to be which specific programs we roll out will be based on interest for the 22-23 school year. So the capital improvement proposal, again, all funded through the general fund budget, and this is where $230,000 will be used to support this project. And why now? Well, we have several of our playgrounds are at or near their life expectancy. So we have 7 playgrounds. 5 of them will be addressed this year. In addition, there's been a lot of concerns about the cleanliness of the current playground surfacing, which consists of tire shreds, and this has raised many concerns from our community. This is directly aligned to the focus of health and safety when determining capital projects, which is one of the things we look at. Since health and safety is something that could be covered with federal stimulus funding, we applied and were approved to use our federal stimulus funding, which is outside of general funding. It's additional money we get from the federal government, is outside of tax levies and the residents. And so we will use that to cover 80% of the replacement of the surfacing material. So we no longer have the concerns of cleanliness. Then we have an E-rate opportunity. The district is very focused on using every option we can to benefit the school district at the least cost to the taxpayer. As you saw, the federal stimulus funding, using the Living with the Bay funding for our playgrounds, and E-rate opportunities is something we do each year. And we use that money to improve our technology at a very limited cost to the taxpayers. So this year, the project is going to be putting additional firewalls at each building, and that will protect us from cyber breaches spreading from one location to the other. So should there be a cyber breach here in the high school, the additional firewalls will prevent it from spreading to Rame or to Center Avenue. And we're going to have an addition of a new outdoor rated network switch for our press box. And that has to do with a lot of the information we discussed earlier about improving our technology. So E-rate projects are reimbursed at 50% from the federal government. So the total anticipated cost of this project for the current year is $32,500. We expect a 50% reimbursement of $16,250, which leaves the district outlay at $16,250. And then we already bid out the project, and BOCES won the project. So we will then see a 67% aid returned on that cost, which will equate to a $10,887. So ultimately, a $32,500 project is costing the taxpayers $5,363. So this is just another way that we utilize options and programs to save the taxpayers' money. It's an ultimate savings of $27,000 to the taxpayers. So this is the 3-part expenditure budget, which it takes our overall expenditure and it divides it by 3 different components. As you can see, the biggest part of our budget is expended on program, and that's where it should be. And then there's the capital, and there's the administrative portion. This is the breakdown by dollar amount, what we spend, what our budget for the 21-22 school year was for each component, what we are proposing for the 22-23 school year, and what the increase was. Again, you can see the bulk of the increase is at program, and that's where it belongs. So just give a little bit more detail what each component contains. The administrative component is the Board of Education costs, central administration, and the central office and building administration, the entire business office, insurance, auditing, legal, and our district clerk. And it's a $108,000 increase, and of that $108,000, $35,000 alone is for insurance. Flood insurance continues to increase here, and there's just no way around it. Every year you see this. This year's a little bigger. Every year I'm talking about, it's a $5,000 increase, it's a $10,000 increase. But we are required by FEMA to keep a very large amount of flood insurance if we want FEMA assistance should we have another event like Sandy. So we have no choice but to keep an extremely high coverage. And so as it goes up, so does our expenses. Program component, again, the most important part of the budget. This is our students. It's our instructional staff, our social workers, our psychologists, our health services, all instructional materials, all of our transportation costs, athletics, co-curricular athletics. And this is where most of the district enhancements, I would say the majority of the district enhancements are included in this part of the budget. And then there's the capital component. This has to do with facilities, basically, our security, our custodial and maintenance staff, operations and maintenance of our buildings, debt service, and capital projects. Again, I keep reminding everybody, we're no longer relying on reserves. We've completely brought this into the general operating budget, which is where it belongs. And there's only a $44,000 increase in this component. So let's talk about the revenues. There are many sources of revenues, and they're all listed there. I'm not going to read them to you. This is the revenue breakdown. We do, in fact, have an increase in state aid. I know there was a lot of confusion based on Newsday articles. I'll explain that a little better in the next slide. But we do, in fact, have an increase in our state aid. And then there's various areas. We get revenue from services, which is like tuition. We do have some tuition students from other districts that come and attend our very well received life skills program, and which we charge the other districts. Obviously, pilot interest for money in our account. And then there's the appropriated fund balance. So we'll talk a little bit about the appropriated fund balance. There's a lot of discussion about the district having a large amount of fund balance going around. And there is a lot of confusion as to what fund balance is and why do we have so much left over and what do we do with it. Well, around February, March, we begin to really look at what our expenditures are coming in. What is based on our budget, like anybody's budget, it's never, dead on. It's a budget. It's an estimate. And so we look at where our staff is. Do we have a lot of staff that's on a leave of absence? We tend to have a lot of staff that's been on leaves over the last couple of years. And then when we fill their roles, we hire staff members at lower salaries. So there's many reasons for balances in the fund balance. There's always money built there for unexpected emergencies. But we anticipate having $1.1 million. And what we do with that money is we don't just absorb it. We are actually returning it to the taxpayers. And it's offsetting a tax levy. So it's decreasing your tax levy. This year we are almost $900,000 below what we could, based on the cap, impose as a levy. And the excess fund balance annually goes towards reducing that. And then there's that living with the Bay funding, the money that we received for administrative oversight and planning for the Live with the Bay project over the past 7 years. And so I've also earmarked that to be returned to offset the playground. And then there's your tax levy, which is about a less than $300,000 increase for the current year. Yes. Yes, correct. It's money, unanticipated money this year that made sense to fund a project that would be quite costly to the taxpayers. So here's the New York State budget. Earlier this month, actually last month, the budget came out at $7.5 million. And when I compare it to what did we build the budget this year, the 21-22 budget. it doesn't make any sense to compare it to anything else, because when we're doing budgeting, we're looking at increased or decreased revenue compared to what we received for this year. So this year we budgeted 7.6 million. They're telling us we're going to get 7.5 million, which is a decrease of 75,000. But everybody else got increased in foundation aid. And this has been the topic of conversation and the biggest confusion in the community. And I've had many conversations with many community residents. We were fully aware that our building aid was going to decrease significantly in the 22-23 school year. And it went down by $800,000. And we knew that. We knew that in 2016-17. And we've been discussing this at budget meetings. It's what brought about our bond project for 2019. And why did it go down? Because a 2005 bond, the aid is now being fully funded. And this is the year it's starting to roll off. So when we started the conversations, we started a facility committee in 2017. And we started public conversations and public meetings as to, okay, now's the time to start to consider additional bond projects that the district needs. The old bond is rolling off. We want to take on a new bond. We want to address concerns in here in the district. And we want to make sure we time it so that we have our borrowing, debt service, additional money we have to lay out, and time it so that the state aid, the building aid that we get on our projects all comes in at the same time to produce a zero impact to the taxpayer. And so we worked for years to make sure we did that. So we were aware this was coming. This was not a surprise to us. So it did go down. What is not reflected in the state aid numbers is we have several projects that we're working on currently that will be finalized, and I will close out before the end of the 22 school calendar year. And that's where the $419,000 comes from. The interest rate right now is 3.2%. No, it's not variable. It's fixed. So what I did, because the state cannot calculate our building aid until they have a final cost report. That's a report that's filed by the district. When the project is completely done, checklists are all finalized, and we say the project's done and all expenses are paid, because we are not going to pay our contractors until our punch list is completed and we're satisfied with the project. At that point, I file a report with the state, and that triggers the building aid. So the state can't calculate that for me because they don't have my numbers, they don't have my reports. But I can calculate it because I know what the projects are costing, and I know which projects will be filed and completed before December of 22. And as long as these projects are filed and completed before December of 22, that's the state aid in addition that we will be receiving as building aid. So I added that back in because I know we're going to get it. So our increase overall is a $344,000. No. Well, it was a decrease. We anticipate a slight increase. We had a decrease 2 years ago, went up slightly, and we anticipate a slight more increase. Excuse me? Do you know what the 12th graders are? 90. Yeah, okay. I'll let. Yeah.
It fluctuates between, it's been as low as about 75 to about 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, depending on the year.
Now, English is the second language. How many students do we have to back over?
I don't have that exact number, but I can also get that number to you. I don't want to give you the wrong information. The number has been increasing. I believe it's about 55 students.
So it's
But-
more than one class.
Excuse me?
It's more than one class.
No, this is K-12. In grades K through 12, all the students they're not in a class, they're integrated in their regular classes and grades, and they receive the services depending on their level of learning. They receive a different amount of services, either 1 or 2 periods a day. of support services.
Okay. So this is foundation aid, something that was promised to us many, many, many years ago. We were flat for several years. Last year, they committed to giving us foundation aid over a 3-year period and bringing us up to where we belong. Last year, we got $329,000. The governor committed to that plan. She gave us 50% of the balance for this year, and we are expected to get the 50% of the balance next year. The foundation aid number went down a little bit from last year, and that's because we did have a declining enrollment the prior year. It's always a year behind. So it did impact us, but for the most part, we should be getting almost $1 million that they owed us over a 3-year period. And then that will continue to come. So this is the use of reserves that we talked about slightly earlier in the presentation. Again, we have significantly decreased our reliance on reserves. And think of reserves as a savings plan, savings account, money you have there in case of emergencies, unforeseen spikes. For example, what's going on right now, unforeseen spikes in costs and inflationary costs. Well, what we would do is we would use the fund because reserves are set up for specific costs. All right, so I have a reserve for the employee retirement system. So if we needed money next year, if there was a loss of state aid, what we would do is we would offset some of the employee retirement system with a reserve, and then we would use the balance, the other general fund revenue to offset. What this is showing you is in 2016-17, when we first started discussing this, we used to use about $1.5 million. We are now down to using only $100,000. So we're not draining from the reserves. We're letting the reserves stay there in case of a need in the future. You shouldn't be taking money out of like a savings account as an everyday, to fund everyday costs. That should be there in case of emergencies. So this is the tax levy cap in accordance with the New York State law. This is not our tax levy increase, it's the cap. So every year we have to do a calculation based on 5 different variables. One is consistent across the state of New York, the other 4 are independent and unique to each and every school district. So when you look in the newspaper, you may see that East Rockaway has a 3.81 cap and Lynbrook might have a 2.25. We're not doing anything wrong, they're not doing anything right. It just happens to be based on multiple variables that are inside of the calculation that has been set by New York State. So every year I present this and I'm supposed to let you know, based on the cap, what is the maximum amount of levy that I can impose against our taxpayers where we only need a simple majority. If I were to go over that levy, I would need a super majority. So nobody really goes over the levy. But many districts stay right at the tax cap. And we did for many years. But as I said earlier in the presentation, one of our goals was to be able to bring in a good, strong budget with enhancements for the students and not have to tax to the maximum, especially when you have a tax cap at 3.81%. This year is a little bit higher, but since it's been in place, the tax cap formula over the last 11 years, our average in this school district, the cap was at 2.21. That's what the average was, and that's what we could have increased, but that's not what we're increasing. So this screen shows you what the tax levy increase is. For the 22-23 school year, although our cap was 3.81, we're putting out a budget that is supported by a 0.93% increase to the tax levy. So that's 2.88% below the tax levy cap, which is a significant difference. And if you see, 3 of the past 4 years, we have brought in our budgets below the tax levy cap. So we've put out strong, sound budgets, maintaining, improving our program, and yet managed to do it without increasing our cost of the taxpayers at the maximum amount. We've kept it below. And since the tax levy cap has gone into effect, the average increase for this district has been 1.84% over 11 years. That's really an incredible number, very low, considering all the improvements we've done in the district. Well, we had 2001 and a 2002 bus. We had a van at 2002 and the 2001, very old, well-maintained, but what was happening is we weren't able to get some of the parts, and then our driver was going from one junkyard to the next until he found it, and it was starting to get a little frightening. So this is the estimated impact of the tax levy to our average homeowner. Again, we get the average assessed value from Nassau County. We don't have anything to do with assessed values. Assessed values on our property is done strictly by Nassau County, although they like to put East Rockaway School District phone number in big, bold print. We have nothing to do with the assessed values. They're telling us the average is $458. That's based on a report provided in April of 2022, meaning this budget would be an increase of $101 annually. So in this budget vote, we have 3 additional propositions. So you will see 4 propositions on your ballot this year, a little bit more than we're typically used to. So I just want to go through what each one is. First, capital reserves. What is a capital reserve? I think we've covered this probably several times already. It's a savings account. It's kept separate and outside of our operating budget for expenditures for specific uses. It must be authorized by the voters, and usually through a proposition or a special vote. They're different from operating budget because their expenditures come from the reserve funds, and you have to authorize those specific uses. And it's no additional cost. Money's already there. It's already sitting in the reserve for specific purposes. And then we have to present it, and the community decides whether or not we should move forward. I'm sorry, let me go back. Did I have a number? We had a $6.2 million capital reserve fund that we applied to the 2019. So once we exhaust it, if we were using a piece, I think I'm going the wrong direction here. Hold on a second. Yeah, if we exhaust it totally and we have funded it completely, we have to reestablish one. For the technology, I did recommend that we use the $100,000 out of our technology reserve. And you'll see that. That's in the next slide. Okay, let's go. Okay. We skipped over Proposition 2. It's going the wrong way. Okay, here we go. Okay, so the second proposition, Proposition 1 is your budget vote. Always there's Proposition 1. You're voting on the budget for the following year. Anything after that will be Proposition 2, 3, 4, whatever. Proposition 2 is that $100,000 used for technology. That is the only reserve we are using annually for what is basically general operating expenses. Our goal was to not be relying on this to supplement our hardware replacement plan, but our technology needs have expanded tremendously during COVID. And so we've only got it down by $100,000, and our plan or hope is that next year we'll be completely off of the use of reserves. This is to no additional cost to the taxpayers. The money is already in the reserve. We just need approval from the taxpayers to utilize it to support our plan. I hate not having a clicker. Okay, Proposition 3, the third proposition you'll see, is the establishment of a capital reserve fund for building improvements. I call it number 3 because we've had 2 already. What this is establishing for future capital projects. So I talked about the $6.2 million that offset our bond. That reserve was capital reserve for improvements and repairs too. That's closed. We used all of that money that was accumulated since 2004 to offset the cost of the bond, so that there was $6.2 million that we did not have to fund, and we did not have to tax the taxpayers for or take debt service from. So what this is, again, long-term planning. We obviously are addressing our needs right now, but we know in the future we will have other needs. And now's the time to establish a new one. And when there's money available, we will fund it. So the term will be 15 years, which is right when the 2019 bond will expire. We're going no more than 15 million plus any interest that we accrue. It will be funded if there's any excess funding from expenditures. We will allocate it to the reserve. We can allocate other reserves there if we need it. It enables the district to reduce the cost of the taxpayers by using these funds, again, for large capital projects without having to borrow. And the key to this, and the most important part of this, is there is no spending from this without voter approval. This is for the future. This is probably for 15 years from now. So what we're doing is every year, we're going to be going out every 15 years or so. When one bond expires, we'll probably go out for more capital improvements because the district will need some upgrades in 15 years. So this is long-term planning. So we create it, we accumulate funds, and then in 15 years when we start to, well, actually probably 12 years, when we start to talk about what's going to happen, the 2019 bond is going to expire, building aid's going to roll off, debt service, which is like your payments, your loan payments, is going to roll off. What projects does the district need now? And there will be money set aside to offset those costs. Right. And this is for the future. This is not a bond. This is like a savings account that will put money in for the future. Just like we used the $6.2 million for the 2019 bond. We had a fund like this that was set up 15 years before that. Well, that's up to. That's not to exceed. That's not to exceed, and it's not like we're asking for taxpayer money. That's a cap. It's just a cap. The last one we had was $7 million. If we get, well, this isn't a bond. It's a savings account. No. This is like having a savings account. It's like, well, we have a special account, and then if there's excess funding, we can put it in there. We're not borrowing, we're just accumulating funds over the next 15 years so that when we're ready to do more capital projects, when the 2019 bond expires, we will have money set aside to offset the cost for the taxpayers. This comes from any excess funds from the budget. So if I go out and I have a budget, and there's money left over because I have a lot of leaves or I have reduced expenditures, maybe my transportation costs come in lower, and then we have excess funding, we can put it in this savings account so that in the future, the taxpayers do not have to fund. Not this, we couldn't. But we could use fund balance to do that. Like I showed you, we use $1 million every year. We would do that first. We would reduce our tax levy first, and then excess funds would go into here. This is only long-term planning to enable us to not have to take out so much bond borrowing in the future. But it's no cost to the taxpayers, as I put up there. That's what this is about, so that I can try and explain it. It's really setting up a savings plan for future. It's long-term planning, and it's setting up an account like we did in 2004, and then we used that money in 2019. It's the same concept. It's now, we've exhausted the prior one, so that we offset the costs from the taxpayers for the 2019 bond, and we are now doing the exact same thing. Okay? Okay. All right. And then the last proposition, Proposition 4, is transportation eligibility. So why do we have this proposition on? This is a petition submitted from our residents. The purpose is to revise the mileage guidelines to provide transportation to students in grades K to 8 who reside at least 1 mile from the school they legally attend. So basically what it reduces, our current policy is that we provide transportation for students K to 8 who live 2 or more miles. This petition, which was submitted by residents, is asking us to provide transportation for students who live 1 or more miles. So it's actually increasing the transportation the district would provide. Well, we are required to put the proposition on because it was submitted by the residents. So we submit the proposition to the residents, we respect the community, and then the community in whole has the right to approve or disapprove this. And this revision is not only K to 8 private and parochial schools, because you can't treat one group of students different than another group of students. So if you want to reduce the mileage from 2 miles to 1 mile, it must be for all students in district and private and parochial. So in order to do this, we did an analysis based on our current enrollment, and we identified there are 70 students that would be eligible for transportation if we decreased it from 2 miles to 1 mile, that transportation to either the junior, senior high school, there's a little section in Bay Park area that's more than 1 mile, but less than 2 miles. That little group of students would get a transportation, and then there are students in 2 other private and parochial schools that would get transportation as well. Correct. No, correct. And so based on those 70 students and where they live and what schools they attend, it would require that the district contracts out for an additional van, an additional bus, and increases a vehicle that right now is a van to a bus, because by going from 2 miles to 1 mile, that particular parochial school is increasing the amount of students that get transportation. Well, it's individual. It's based on the residents, and you know, it's not one person. The one person put a petition out. You need to get a certain required amount of signatures, and that required amount as per board policy has been met. And so we respect the community, and now it's a community's decision. And so what is the impact of this proposition should it pass? It will increase the budget that we propose will go up by 146,178. And that was calculated based on the current year's contractual cost for buses. We don't know what next year is going to be, because we're waiting for CPI and we go out for buses every year. It could be more than that, but right now, based on this proposition, it's a $146,000 increase. It takes the tax levy will increase from 0.93 to 1.39% because we have to levy for the additional money. And then the yearly impact to the average homeowner goes from $101 to $151. So, we're only, the current budget that we're proposing is less than a $300,000 increase in the tax levy. This is another 146. It's almost 50% more than what we originally proposed. So, this is our ballot. It's very small, very hard to read. But I thought it was really important to point out that it's very important that the community vote for everything on this ballot. So Proposition 1, which is up at the top, is for the vote, the annual budget. We have to say yes or no, you approve or you disapprove. Down in the bottom right-hand corner, those are our trustees, so you should vote for that as well. But when we're talking about propositions, Proposition 2, you need to either say yes or no for the technology reserve. That's the $100,000 to support the technology hardware replacement. Proposition 3 is to establish that capital reserve. And then Proposition 4 is to expand the transportation eligibility. So every single one of the propositions must be voted on. So if you just vote for the budget, then you're not voting for anything else. So you should vote for every single proposition. That you should vote for every proposition? Absolutely. You should voice your opinion. Let us hear you. No, that's not my role. That's your role. So what happens? I hate this part. What happens if the budget goes down? Well, it's kind of silly. It's only a $300,000 increase. But what happens if the budget goes down? We can have a revote on the third Tuesday of June. And the board has 3 options. We can reduce the budget that we proposed and go out with a different number on June 21st. We can just put the same number out and let you revote on June 21st. Or we could just go strictly to contingency and not have a second vote, because the second vote does cost money. So what are the rules on contingency? If we should fall under a contingency budget, the tax levy cannot be increased. So that 0.93% increase would turn to 0. This would require that we reduce the budget by $295,000. And non-contingent items would have to be removed, which means all equipment would have to be removed. Transfer the capital for building improvements. So that money that we were talking about for the playgrounds would be removed. Student supplies that can be purchased by parents and guardians has to be removed. And then community use of our facilities would have to require a fee. We could not allow our community to use our facilities free of charge. So that's what the contingency rules are. So in summary, we have 4 propositions on the ballot. Each and every one of them must be voted on or should be voted on individually. The budget increase is 2.08%. Tax levy is 0.93, and a contingency budget would mean a reduction of $295,000. And there is our vote. It's been changed. Please note, it's been changed to 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. It used to be start at 6:30, end at 9:30. We had very little turnout in the half hour in the morning and half an hour at night. So now the vote is between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. Questions? Surprise!
know you promised, we had the $18 million bond issue, and if we got any other money, tell me, what's the story?
We would love to, we are going to do an energy performance
Yep, I'd be willing to
contract now
speak
that
to
the
that.
bond is done. And so there will be an opportunity to look for some energy cost savings at that time.
Yes, so the reason we held off with solar panels is because with an energy performance contract, it guarantees that the money we save in energy offsets the total cost of the upgrades to the building. So when we gave it a lot of thought, we were going to start with an energy performance contract initially and then go to the bond. And when you really thought about it, it made no sense because we replaced all the heating, air conditioning throughout the district, right? Which will reduce on its own the energy cost. So when you do an energy performance contract, they do an analysis on your expenditures on energy, and then they guarantee that it will be reduced by a certain amount of money with these upgrades. Solar is one of the ones that we definitely have our mind set on. But I don't want it to be compared against our inefficient energy systems right now, our inefficient heating system. I wanted to put our efficient heating system in first and then make them develop a plan in which they would save even more energy for us to offset the cost of solar, all the LED lighting inside the district. So we kind of strategically placed it to benefit the taxpayers.
But in the fall, the voters approved expending additional funds from the bond that were not used to improve the HVAC systems in both the elementary schools. So down the road, there will not be window air conditioners.
Yeah, that's our goal.
There'll be efficient systems at both elementary schools, much like we're putting in the high school here. But that will not happen this year. It will happen in subsequent years.
Are these all going to be built into the wall?
They're all going to be part of the
Complete HVAC system.
heating and air conditioning with the units in the system. So all the window air conditioners will be removed.
When you voted in the fall, that's.
But anyway, are they, you have to have an evaporator and you have to have a condenser. Are they used as fitting like when you're in a hotel room? You know, when you go into a hotel.
They have that down there. Yes, that's what it's like. Yes, that's what they're going to do here. This building should be done in hopefully the end of the summer, so that when we open up in the fall, there'll be no window conditioners. There'll be like the univents on the walls, which will do both heating and air conditioning. And then we hope to expand that and complete that in both elementary buildings next year.
Yes, they're currently putting in the pipes now in various places in this building. And they're going to be taking out all of the old system, and then many of these units have already been delivered. You'll see big boxes around the.
Yeah, there's
around
boxes all
around
over the
building
district, yeah.
That contain the units that will
Yeah.
be installed.
They're not actually going to be like putting a evaporator out the window, out the door or the building. You won't see any structural.
Nope,
No.
no, it's all inside the building. Yeah. So that is, so we talked about an energy performance contract, I believe in 2017, and we gave it a lot of thought, like we do with everything in the district. We think about long-term, we think about what's in the best interest of the district and what's going to be financially the best thing, process. And so we swapped it and we decided, let's do our bond first. Let's reduce our energy costs. And then let's make it a little bit more difficult for the energy performance contractor to offset and find other ways for us to save money, because I didn't want it based on inefficient energy systems at the moment. So that will be phase 3, because we're going to have phase 2 will be the elementary buildings. Yeah, well, we got a lot. We designed it for this building, and we did a wing, kindergarten wing over in Center. And we did a couple of the library, no, not the library, the auditorium, or the AP room.
The library.
Yeah, and Center had it in the library.
Oh,
We
right,
did,
yes,
no.
library had it.
We did the AP room and the gymnasium in Center, as well as the kindergarten classroom. That was what the initial bond covered. And in Rame, we were doing the library and the gymnasium
All-purpose room.
and cafeteria, right? So then when we were coming on the budget and we were concerned about the ventilation with the COVID and everything, we just went back out to the community and we asked to expand so that we can complete all 3 buildings with completely new heating and ventilation, removal of all window air conditioners, and really drastically improve the ventilation as well as improve the heating and air conditioning and reduce our energy costs. Well, we go out to bid. By law, we're required to go out to bid. So we haven't gone out to bid for Rame and Center yet. So, okay.
So to answer your previous question, the graduating class this year is around 89 students. We have approximately 50 students at this time receiving E&L services.
Oh, wow, you're great.
Yeah, she knows her stuff.
It's about that.
One last thing. I would like to see you leave the door open, either just a gate or the whole door. You did a beautiful job on that field. I don't think there's anybody in this room or in your neighborhood that would complain about that field. You did the track excellently, you did what resources you had, and you did a tremendous job. But I have a neighbor across the street, Phil Levinson, and he wants to bring his kids over there to play on it. And he says it's locked up on the weekend. And I said, well, if I get here, I will mention to you that you should be able to use the field if you pay.
It should not be locked up on the weekend unless there's an event happening. So I will certainly look into that. It should not.
There is something on our website. There's a QR code that if you scan it, or you'll be able to see what the athletic schedule is, and that would be the only time that it's not available, because for safety reasons, we wouldn't want people walking the track while there's a softball game or something going on. But other than that, the field will be open until 9 p.m. And then on Saturdays as well.
So there is a schedule as to when, yeah. So if it continues, you should call my office, and we will certainly look into it. I will.
So, Ms. Greer, I understand that Proposition 4 was submitted by petition. Wasn't like a board initiative, but I was curious as to why it wasn't ever discussed during budget advisory committee meetings.
It came in very late. It came in right at the deadline. We had to react very quickly to approve it. You know, you have a certain date that it must be submitted by, and we got it. It was due on Monday, and we got it like Friday. So there really wasn't. We did discuss it when we approved it, the resolution, but we got it at the last minute. Yes, Ms. Actera?
In October, the Education Foundation received a grant request for funding to create some outdoor learning spaces at the elementary school, and we committed to work with the district on this project. I was just wondering if the Board of Education has created any kind of a plan or has started discussions on what those spaces might look like, and if any creation or enhancement of spaces, if that was included in this budget that was presented to you.
So I would say, no, it has not been discussed, and I don't believe that we've actually, and I apologize, have brought it to the Board of Education's attention. Now that you have brought it up, I will make sure that we discuss it. But we always have money built into the budget. Got rid of that maintenance from the capital reserve. There's always money built into the budget to support projects like this. So we certainly will look into it and follow up.
We were also hoping to receive the proposals from the teachers who were interested in that. And we have not yet received, any requests. I know that there is a garden. Mrs. Kright is a very, very active group through our learning loss program. So we have supported some of a project of that type. I think there's over 30 students that are participating in that. It's an enrichment program. We had a great response. So through the enrichment funds, through the CARE Act and some of the COVID funding that we received, those would be opportunities to propose those. And so we did have a call for proposals earlier in the year. Mr. DiTomaso is handling that, and we did receive one from Mrs. Kright for that type of a learning experience, but we did not receive any others. So hopefully the next call we will be, we're asking for ideas for summer programs, learning loss summer programs. So we've sent that out, or we'll be sending it out shortly, and hoping that some teachers will make those proposals because we can support it through those funds.
So just to clarify, the proposal that we received was from Raymond School.
Ms. Donovan.
one of the teachers there. And it identified, I believe, like 5 to 7 areas that they were looking to make improvements on. And I believe that there were some preliminary conversations that had been made with Dr. MacArthur and with Mr. Daly in the facilities area. But I just was wondering, like, where, it's so many things that put it onto the schedule inadvertently, and when things kind of fall out. But I just wanted to see if that.
That's certainly an option, and we can reach out, Mr. DiTomaso, and I can reach out to Dr. MacArthur to see where they are with that. Because again, as I said, this summer, we can certainly look to offer that, and then in the fall.
Right, I just wanted to make sure that, that it voiced also that the foundation is still committed to working on those spaces. I know the initial conversation was at Rain, but when we discussed it, it was in, like I said, preliminary staging, and also the concern from the district that there was equitable space created at both schools. So I just wanted to kind of see where we were with that.
We will definitely rekindle that conversation.
Is that all? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Congratulations, I understand you're retiring.
Yes,
I'm sorry to see you leave.
Thank you.
Not a lot of this, but we wish you well.
Uh-oh, we're in the dark.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. I can never get this. All I
I
can,
hit it twice. Yeah.
oh, it's this
I'll
one.
just say,
Don't do it. What?
thank you very much for attending. We apologize once again for the technological difficulties. For those of you live streaming at home, the presentation will be posted tomorrow, and hopefully we can coordinate possibly the sound to go along with the presentation so you can have a better view. So thank you and good night.